This activity called God's Promises will remind the children of all the times that God kept his promise to the Israelites to take them to the promised land. Now the children will move through some stations that remind them of the different ways that God kept his promise to the people of Israel throughout the series. Now for the purpose of this demonstration, I'm just going to demonstrate each station with one person in it. When you do this in your classroom, you'll want to take the entire class through the station. So where I have a small circle of chairs, you'll want to use a large circle of chairs to put your entire class in it. To lead the activity, you'll do something like this. All right, now who can tell me what we're learning today? Today, I think you're almost there. God will
keep his promises.
Keep his promises. Very good. Okay, let's all say it together. Ready? God will keep his promises. Very good. Good job, guys. Well, today we heard a story about how God kept his promise to take Israel to the promised land, right? It was a land that was really nice, had lots of grass and lots of water, and Israel really wanted to be there. But throughout this whole series, we've talked about how there were ways that Israel might not get to go to the promised land, but God always kept his promises. So we're going to look at some of those ways today, okay? Now, if you remember at the very, very beginning, Israel was in Egypt, and they were slaves there. And they weren't treated very nicely at all, but Pharaoh, who was the king of Egypt, wouldn't let them leave. They were stuck in Egypt, just like you're stuck in these chairs. Now, there's really no way out of these chairs without touching them, right? You can't like just step in between them or anything like that. They're pretty close together. And so if you're Israel and you're stuck in Egypt, but God's promised to take you to the promised land, he's going to have to get you out of Egypt, right? Well, God used Moses to create a way out of Egypt for Israel, so they were able to leave. Now you're out of Egypt, you could go to the promised land, right? Right. Well, then Israel got to the Red Sea. Now, the Red Sea was really, really deep, and there was no way for them to get across because they couldn't walk on water. Nobody can walk on water, right? Well, Jesus did, but we couldn't, yeah. So Israel was stuck between where they were and where the promised land was, and they had no way to get to the promised land. So God had to provide a way for them to cross the Red Sea. Can you guys help me? Okay, I'm going to have you pick up the water here and stand it up like walls on the side. There you go, and you can walk right down the middle of the Red Sea on dry ground. Very good, you can put it back. And that's just what God did in the Bible. He made a way for Israel to cross the Red Sea. Great, you can have a seat. And Cece, why don't you come over here and give me a hand real quick? With the desert. Now, do you remember when they crossed the Red Sea, Israel went to the desert. And the desert was really dry, and it was really hot. And it wasn't anything like the promised land where the water and the food and everything good for them would be. But God found some ways to take care of them in the desert. The first way he took care of them is by providing manna for them. Now, rice is kind of like manna, so you can kind of feel the rice here. And each day, God would make the manna rain down onto the ground, and they would have something to eat. Isn't that neat? Fill these for me. What are these?
Feathers.
Feathers. And where are feathers from?
Birds.
They are from birds. God also provided birds for Israel to eat. That way, they would not just have the manna, but they'd have some meat as well. And so they were able to eat the manna as well as some of the birds. Now, let me give you a rock here. Do you think you could get water out of this? Like, what if you squeeze it really hard? You think? No? Well, God was able to get water out of a rock. When they were really, really thirsty, God told Moses to strike the rock with his staff, and when he did, water came out and they were all able to drink. Isn't that neat? So God kept his promise to Israel by providing food and water for them while they're in the desert so that they could get to the promised land. All right, now Sam, you're over here, and this is going to represent the promised land. Now, in the promised land, there was lots of good food and really nice water. Now, I've got some water here, so why don't you grab a cup. You can have any on them, okay? And tell me if that's really good, like nice cold water.
Yeah, it's really good.
Yeah. Well, that's God's promise to Israel so that he would take care of them, that he would get them out of Egypt and through the Red Sea and take care of them in the desert so that one day they could be in the promised land. Now, after you've had an opportunity to go through the activity and have the children do each of the stations, you'll end the activity by gathering the kids together, something like this. All right, guys, that was a great trip that we took. And we got to see how God kept his promises many different ways, right? We got to see how God got the people out of Egypt, how he helped them across the Red Sea, how he gave them food and water, and how he took them to the promised land. Now, in each of these cases, the people could have gotten really discouraged, right? Because it wouldn't look like they'd get to the promised land. But God promised them that he'd take them to the promised land, and he kept that promise by providing for them all along the way. Did you know that God promises us things too? Those things are in the Bible. That's why we've been saying that God will keep his promises. Remember, this is to represent our Bible. And we can read about God's promises to us in the Bible. So let's learn a little bit more about God's promises, okay? All right, good job.